There is a blue Maxwell House coffee can on the back of my stove right now, and it has been sitting on the back of some woman's stove in my family since the winter of 1931. It has held bacon grease and buttons and bent nails and 3 good harvests of saved seed, and it has never once been thrown away. Because in my grandmother Della's house on County Road 6 outside Tipton, Indiana, a thing was not garbage just because it was finished being one thing. I am her granddaughter Pearl, and these are 25 things my grandmother never threw away, and every single one of them quietly saved her money. The kind of money that does not look like much until you count it at the end of a year, and it comes to a winter coat. $7 then is near 80 now, and Della raised 9 children through the Depression and never once paid the store to take her trash away and sell it back to her by the package. Now keep your eye on that coffee can, because we are going to come back to it at the very end, and it is number 1. Stay with me until number 7, the one that fed this family the morning the mill closed, and watch for number 3, because it is sitting in your refrigerator door right now, and you are about to pour it straight down the sink. So pour yourself a cup of something hot and hit that subscribe button while you're thinking of it, because I leave the porch light on for the people who stay. My promise to you is Della's promise to her own table. Spend less, waste nothing, and keep the kitchen wisdom the store would rather you forget. The whole modern business of clean living, the paper towel and the cling film and the bag with the little zipper, is just somebody charging you by the roll for the keeping your grandmother did in a drawer for free. Number 25 is the bread bag. The plastic sleeve a store loaf comes in, the one you tear open and drop on the floor. Della never bought a store loaf, but the few that came into the house from a church supper, she washed the bags in dishwater, hung them on the line by the clothespins, and saved them in a drawer by the stove. They lined her boots in a wet field. They wrapped a sandwich for a man's lunch pail. They went over a rising bowl of dough, and they froze the summer's green beans for the price of nothing at all. A box of freezer bags at the IGA is near $5 now for what the Brid already gave you for free. That is a nickel a bag for a bag you already paid for once. Waste nothing, and you stop buying the same thing twice. Number 24 is the rubber band. Della kept a doorknob in the pantry with a ball of them grown to the size of a fist, every one of them off a bunch of asparagus or the newspaper boy's roll. They closed a sack of flour. They held a quilt rolled for the attic. They gripped a jar lid that a tired hand could not. You can buy a bag of them today for $1 and never need to, because the world keeps trying to hand you rubber bands for free, and you keep throwing them out. A pantry that catches what comes free already has half of what the store wants to sell it. Number 23 is the glass jar, not the canning jar, the store jar, the one a pickle or a jam came home in. Della soaped the labels off in warm water, and those jars became her drinking glasses, her bean storage, her button jars, her measure of lard. The food companies would dearly love you to believe that a jar with a brand on the side is trash, and a jar from the home goods aisle is treasure, and they are the very same glass. I drink my morning water out of a mayonnaise jar from before you were born. A jar is a jar, and the only difference is who you let talk you into paying twice. Number 22 is the twist tie and the little plastic bread tab. The square of paper-covered wire, the flat tab with the date stamped on it. Della kept hers in a King Edward cigar box my grandfather emptied in 1936, the same box that had held her string before the ties ever came along, and out of it she tied the tomato vines to the stake, labelled her seed packets in pencil, and bundled the lamp cord behind the Philco radio. A garden store will sell you a roll of green plant tie for $4 to do exactly what the bread loaf threw in for free. Her brother Wilbur used to say the cheapest hardware store in the county was the bottom of Della's junk drawer. And he was right. Number 21 is the newspaper. After the Tipton Daily Tribune was read all the way to the church notices, 2 cents it cost on the porch in 1941, it had a second life longer than its first. Della washed her windows with a sheet of it and a splash of cider vinegar, and they came up without a streak. No blue spray, no paper towel. She started her morning fire with it, packed her mother's china in it the year they brought it down from Kokomo, laid it down thick under the tomatoes to choke the weeds, and lined the floor of the chicken house with it. The paper towel companies, Scott and the rest, built an entire aisle out of convincing you that a clean window needs a thing you throw away after one wipe. Your grandmother cleaned hers with the thing she had already finished reading. Number 20 is the string. Every length of it off the parcels from Hostetler's meat market on Main Street, off the feed sacks, off the white bakery boxes, wound onto a ball that lived in the kitchen drawer and was the size of a grapefruit by 1944. It tied the tomato plants, it trussed the Sunday hen, it hung the sage and the dill to dry from the rafter. It flew more than one kite over the back 40 for a boy who had no store-bought one. A craft store ball of twine is $3 now, for less than Della wound up in a single year of suppers. String is the patience of a thrifty house, made into a thing you can hold. Number 19 is the worn-out clothes, and here is where the real machine starts, so stay with me. Nothing made of cloth ever left Della's house as cloth. A shirt too far gone for a patch did not go in the trash. It went in the rag bag that hung on the cellar door. From the rag bag it became a dust cloth, a canning jar wiper, a wrapping for the good knives, a bandage in a hurry. And what was too small even to wipe with, she cut into strips and braided into a rug, or saved into the quilt pile. I have a rug on my kitchen floor right now, braided out of my late husband's flannel shirts, and I walk on him every morning, and it is the warmest spot in the house. The store will sell you a bag of shop rags for $6. You are wearing next year's for free. Number 18 is the worn bedsheet, and it is the rag bag's older cousin. When a sheet wore thin up the middle where the body lies, Della did not pitch it. She tore it right down the centre, turned the 2 strong outer edges into the middle, and sewed it back together, sides to middle. And that sheet gave her another 5 years off the part that never wore. When even that gave out, it went to the rag bag from number 19, and from there to the backing of a quilt. 1 sheet, 3 lives. The linen company would like that sheet in a landfill, so you will come by another. Della made 1 set of sheets outlast a mattress. Number 17 is the feed sack and the flour sack, and this one I want you to really hear. Through the 30s, the mills learned that farm women were sewing dresses out of their cotton sacks, so the companies started printing the sacks in flowers and calico on purpose, to sell more flour to the woman whose daughter needed a Sunday dress. Della made my mother a dress out of a Pillsbury sack, with little blue cornflowers on it in 1939, and the slip out of the plain ones, and dish towels out of the bleached muslin, and there was not a yard of it wasted. That is the one time in this whole list the company did right, and only because the women had already shamed them into it by refusing to throw the sack away. Never doubt that thrift, done by enough hands, can bend a factory. Number 16 is the button, and now I am going to keep the promise I made you about that coffee can, because the buttons lived in it for years before the grease moved back in. When any garment finally died, before the cloth went to the rag bag in number 19, Della cut every button off it first. In the hard winter of 1934, she cut the 4 bone buttons off a neighbour's overcoat the day he passed. And she sewed 2 of them onto my father's school coat in 1951, 17 years later. And he never knew he went to school, buttoned up by a dead man's good coat. A card of 4 buttons at the sewing counter is near $3 today. Della have a coffee can of 1,000 of them, sorted by a child's hand on a winter night, and it cost her nothing but the minute it takes to cut instead of throw. A button is the cheapest thing in the world to keep, and the most aggravating thing in the world to need and not have. Number 15 is the soap sliver, the last thin curl of a bar, too small to hold, the part most people drop in the trash without a thought. A cake of P&G white naphtha soap was a nickel at the Red and White in 1933, and at a nickel you did not waste the last inch of one. So Della saved the slivers in a little wire cage with a handle off the shelf at the Rexall and swished it through the dishwater to raise the suds. When the cage was full, she pressed the dried slivers into a wet new bar, and they healed together into one. A year of slivers is a free bar of soap, and a life of them is a great many. Save the nothings and watch them stack into a something on the shelf. Number 14 is the worn-out nylon stocking. They were so dear in the war years, you mended a run with a dab of clear nail polish and prayed. And when the nylons finally came back to the pennies in Kokomo in 1945, a woman still did not bin a pair just because it had run. A knotted leg of one stored Della's onions and garlic hung in the cellar, so the air moved through and nothing rotted. Stuffed, they filled the draught under the door and the shoulders of a rag doll she made my mother. Balled up, a nylon buffed her cook stove to a shine no rag could match. The storage bin people at the home store want $8 now for a hanging onion keeper. Your grandmother grew hers in the very thing that had already worn out doing its first job. Number 13 is the aluminium foil. I know what you are thinking. That foil is a one-use thing, and that is exactly what Reynolds spent a fortune teaching you. When Reynolds Wrap first reached the Red and White around 1948, it cost the earth, the better part of $1 for a little roll. So nobody in their right mind used a sheet once. Della used hers, then smoothed it flat on the drain board, wiped it down, folded it soft, and used it 3 and 4 times until it truly could not be used. And even then it scrubbed a scorched pan or hung from the cherry tree on a string to scare the jays. A roll is $4 today, and you are burning through it like it is free, because a company spent 80 years telling you to. Used like it still cost $1, 1 sheet is 3. Number 12 is the wax wrapper, the waxed sleeve inside a box of Nabisco shredded wheat or a sleeve of saltine crackers. Della peeled those liners out, flattened them under the family Bible overnight, and they greased her cookie sheets so nothing stuck, wrapped her own bread so it would not dry, and slid between the hamburger patties in the chest freezer so they broke apart with a flick. A roll of wax paper is $3 now, for the very thing the cracker box was going to throw at you anyway. There is a whole free pantry hiding inside the packages you already carried home from the store. Number 11 is the candle stub. The last guttered inch in the holder, the bit nobody can burn. Della dropped every stub into a Prince Albert tobacco tin, and when it was full, she stood it in a pot of hot water, melted them down together, and poured the wax into a teacup with a length of the string from number 20 run down the middle for a wick. The ice storm of January 1951 took the lines down across the whole township for 4 days. And while the rest of the road sat in the dark, Della lit candles she had poured out of 2 years of leftovers. A box of emergency candles is $6 at the hardware store. Della's were made of the emergencies she had already lived through. Number 10 is the wood ash out of the cook stove, a black home comfort range that burned from before dawn. When Della shovelled the firebox clean, the ash did not go in the trash. It went to work. A damp pinch scoured a greasy pot bright before there was ever a scouring powder to buy. A scattering sweetened the soil where the beans would go, and a line of it across the doorsill in the wet spring of 1937 kept the slugs off the lettuce. She even leached it through a barrel for the lye that made the soap that made the slivers back in number 15. The garden centre bags that same ash up as soil amendment now and charges you for it. Della's came free out of the fire that already cooked the supper. Number 9 is the coffee grounds, and I will tell you a small thing on myself here. For about 10 years I quietly threw my morning grounds in the trash like everybody else, until I remembered Della never did, and now they go straight out to the roses, and I am ashamed of every bag I wasted. She dried her spent grounds on a paper by the window, and worked them into the soil around the acid-loving plants, scattered them where the cats were not welcome, and rubbed a damp handful into her hands to kill the smell of onion and fish. The garden store sells a little bag of coffee grounds as plant food now, which is about the most brazen thing I have ever heard, selling a woman back the very grounds she made her own coffee with. Number 8 is the eggshell. From her own hens, never bought but kept all the same, Della crushed the shells fine, and they went back to the hens for their own shell strength, or into the tomato holes against the rot that blackens the bottom, or scattered as a sharp line the slugs would not cross to reach the seedlings. A few, left in halves, started her seeds on the windowsill and went straight into the ground when the frost broke, shell and all. A breakfast you already ate is a garden you have not planted yet. Number 7 is the stale bread heel, and this is the one I told you fed this family the morning the mill closed. In the winter of 1958, the canning plant on the Elwood Road shut without a week's notice, and the next morning there was no money in the house and a bag of hard bread heels Della had been saving in the warming oven. She tore them into a pan, poured over the eggs and the last of the milk going sour, a spoon of sugar and the cinnamon, and baked the 9 of us a bread pudding that we still talk about at funerals. Nothing in that pan cost a cent that day. The heel of the bread, the end nobody wants, the part the sandwich shops throw away by the trash bag, fed a family on the worst morning of a hard year. That is not garbage. That is supper, waiting to be remembered. Number 6 is the vegetable peeling and the trimming, the onion skin and the carrot top and the celery butt. Into a bag in the freezer they went all week, and on Sunday they boiled down into a broth that cost nothing and made everything. The onion skins even dyed her Easter eggs a deep gold without a drop of store colouring. You were paying near $3 for a box of broth at the store that is mostly salt and water, and throwing in the trash the very scraps it is pretending to be made of. Number 5 is the soured milk. When the milk from June the cow turned before it was drunk, Della did not pour it out, she put it to work. Because sour milk is the secret behind the tenderest biscuit and the moistest cake there is. A cup of it where a recipe wants milk, with a pinch more soda, and that turn that you fear is the very thing that makes the crumb. The dairy aisle sells you a fancy cultured buttermilk for the same trick your refrigerator was about to do for free. A thing going off is not always a thing gone bad. Sometimes it is just becoming the next thing. Number 4 is the bone, and it shakes hands with the peelings from number 6. The ham bone at Easter, the chicken back, the T-bone scraped clean at a Sunday dinner, none of them hit the trash. They went into the same broth pot, and a single ham bone could flavour a pot of beans, then a soup, then a mess of greens, 3 meals deep before it gave up the last of itself. A good bone has 3 dinners left in it after the meat has gone, and the only people who do not know that are the ones who have never been hungry enough to find out. Number 3 is the one I told you is sitting in your refrigerator door right now. It is the pickle juice and the brine off the olives and the syrup left in the bottom of the peach can. Do not pour it down that sink. Della dropped sliced cucumbers and onions and hard-boiled eggs straight into the leftover pickle brine for a second free jar of pickles off juice she had already paid for. The peach syrup sweetened her oatmeal and her tea. The food company is delighted when you pour half of what you bought down the drain, because the empty jar sends you back to the store that much sooner. You bought the whole jar, use the whole jar. Number 2 is the coffee can itself, the blue Maxwell House from the very start of this list, and now you see why I told you to keep your eye on it. The can outlived the coffee by 50 years. It held the buttons from number 16, and the seed, and the bent nails worth straightening. It carried the eggs in from the hen house. It measured the flour. It caught the drips under a leak in the roof. And a child banged it as a drum. The container companies want $12 for a set of plastic tubs that crack in a year and turn the colour of weak tea. Della had a shelf of coffee cans that outlived 3 presidents. The cheapest storage in the world is the can your coffee already came in. And number 1. Number 1 is the bacon grease, and it lives in that same blue can, back where it started, on the back of my stove this morning. Every strip of bacon Della ever fried, she poured the hot grease through a bit of cloth into that can, and it stood there, cooling into soft white gold. It fried the eggs and the potatoes. It greased the cornbread pan and the biscuit sheet. It seasoned the beans and the greens and the very bread pudding from number 7, and a spoonful sealed the top of a crock of pork to keep it through the winter. There was no bottle of cooking oil bought in that house from one year to the next, because the bacon paid for the breakfast, and then it paid for the supper too. The grocery store will sell you a jug of oil and a pound of bacon, and never once tell you that one of them makes the other one free. That is the whole of it. The smallest, plainest, most thrown-away thing on this whole list, and it is the one that fed us best. So there are your 25, and I want you to see that they are not 25 tricks at all. They are one habit wearing 25 coats, and the habit is this. A thing is not finished just because it is finished being the first thing. The food company and the paper company and the container company have spent my entire life and a great deal of money teaching you to feel the opposite, to feel that keeping is dirty and buying is clean, that a saved jar is clutter and a bought one is order. It is the most expensive lie they ever sold, and your grandmother saw through it before they even finished telling it. There is a woman watching me right now at her own kitchen table on a cheque that runs out before the month does, and she has been made to feel that all this saving and keeping is beneath her, a sad and shameful thing from a poor and backward time. It is not. It is the richest thing I know. Della raised 9 children through the Depression and a closed plant and a hard county, and she did it not by having more than her neighbours, but by throwing away less than anyone on the road. 1 bread bag and 1 button and 1 spoon of bacon grease at a time, until the throwing away itself was the only thing she could not afford. A man named Ronald Reed swept floors and pumped gas up in Vermont his whole quiet life, and when he died, he left better than $8 million, and every dollar of it was made the way Della made hers, by keeping what the rest of the world was busy throwing out. Go look in your own trash tonight before you set it out. I will bet you the porch light that half of what is in it is something Della would have called supper, or a candle, or a dress. This is Granny Pearl, and I will leave the porch light on for you.